Hello and welcome back everyone. Today we're going to talk about another point of your monthly budget and also something that's actually really important even though it doesn't cost you a lot, insurance. On top of health insurance, of course, which is covered in another video. Let's first start with banking. So banking is relatively simple in Switzerland. You might know that Switzerland is well known for banking. The downside is actually of that for a long time Switzerland didn't really have very good banks because most of the banks could basically rest on the laurels of offshore banking, and that only changed recently, and I think now Switzerland is more or less on par with most of the other European countries where there are really good neobanks in Switzerland. In terms of banking, you basically have two options in Switzerland. You can either go with the traditional banks like the Kantonalbanken, or with some of the other big business banks like UBS, Postfinance, and so on. And the other option is neobanks, so banks like Neon, Yapil, ZAK, and a few more. I think every year there's at least one new company joining that game, and sometimes it's even the traditional incumbents who actually are starting a completely new offering and are trying to be new and hip. Typically, I recommend that you actually go with one of these neobank offerings and that you only go with the traditional cantonal banks, Postfinance, UBS, if you really have to. Because the downside of the traditional ones is that their mobile apps and also their web banking, it's actually quite bad. The usability is really bad, and also they cost more money. So these traditional banks, they really only make sense if you have certain needs, if you really like to go to a branch for whatever reason, or sometimes it can be a bit easier if you need a bank account, like immediately it can be a bit easier to open an account with a traditional bank, whereas with the neobanks, sometimes you might have to wait 2 to 4 weeks for them to open the account if you come into Switzerland as a complete new expat and you don't have your ID document yet. But there are differences. Some of the banks are actually easier depending on what country you're currently in. Cost-wise, it's relatively straightforward. Neobanks typically do not charge you a monthly fee. Instead, they only charge you for card usage, be it foreign currency transaction fees or all sorts of hidden fees that you will discover in time, whereas the traditional banks, they typically charge you a monthly account maintenance fee around 5 to 10 Swiss francs per month. Occasionally, they charge you extra for a credit card, like a couple of Swiss francs per month extra for certain types of credit cards. Debit cards are usually included. That's it pretty much. So basically there's not a big difference. You will end up paying around, let's say 50 to maybe 100 Swiss francs of fees to a Swiss bank. Typically, keep in mind that if you have additional tax residencies for whatever reason, then it gets much more complicated and you will pay more like 500 Swiss francs per year of banking fees. But typically you don't actually need that. So this is really only for edge cases. So you can basically budget around 5 Swiss francs per month on average. And as I said before, with a neobank, at least you don't have monthly maintenance fees, but they charge you for certain extras sometimes. So that can help you lower your cost if you don't need any of these extras. The second part is insurances. And we already did a video about health insurance, so I'm not going to talk about health insurance here again. I'm instead going to talk about 2 to 3 other types of insurance, even if none of them are technically legally required. And the first one is private liability insurance. Private liability insurance is probably something you know from your home country already. Basically, if you break something, be it in the flat where you live or anywhere you go, then you are liable to repair the damage. And if it only costs 100 euros, then who cares? You can just pay for it yourself. You don't need an insurance. But if it costs maybe 10,000 or 100,000 or €1,000,000, then maybe it would be better if you had insurance for that, because it would be really, really ruining you typically if you had to pay €1,000,000 if you accidentally damage something terribly, or if there's a water leakage in your apartment and then the whole building gets damaged and so on. Rare events that can become very expensive. For these, you would typically want a private liability insurance. And also landlords in Switzerland might actually ask you for it. So even though they're not strictly legally required, they're, I would say, de facto required, because you're going to look bad if they're asking you for it and you don't have it. And in any case, they're so inexpensive, so it's really worth to have it. The second almost mandatory insurance that practically everyone gets is household insurance. Household insurance is typically actually sold together with private liability, even though it's two types of contracts, because some of the stuff that can happen in your apartment, it's typically covered by this household insurance. So, for example, if somebody breaks in, or if there's a fire, sometimes water leakage, and all sorts of related events, they're typically covered by this household insurance. And it really makes sense for most people to get it. Even if you don't have very expensive furniture and computers, typically just makes sense to get it. And also, of course, they sometimes offer certain add-ons. So you can sometimes get really inexpensive vacation additional coverages, like for rental cars, so that they cover the excess damage for like 2-3 Swiss francs per month and stuff like that, or an extension for your electronics warranty, like another year of warranty. Sometimes is actually bundled with these insurances at a very low price. But of course, you need to check the details and compare the prices a bit. And then basically the third type of insurance that really many people in Switzerland and also in some other European countries like Germany do get, even though it's not so mandatory, is legal insurance. So for example, if you ever were to end up in a legal fight with your landlord or with your employer or with your neighbor, then legal insurance can help, although you have to keep in mind that this type of insurance has a lot of exclusions. So I personally am not the biggest fan of it, because I feel like very often the really interesting stuff is not actually covered by this insurance. But if you sort of are afraid of this, it can make sense. They also provide a hotline, so it might make you sleep easier. So you could look into getting this legal insurance if you feel better with it. A typical amount of money you should actually budget for these two things. Banking insurances is, as I said, banking around 5 Swiss francs per month maybe. And then for household insurance and private liability insurance, about 40 to 50 Swiss francs per month should be the maximum. You can definitely get something cheaper. I would say 40 to 50 Swiss francs, that's already sort of the upper end. If you either have a more traditional brand insurance company where they have more branches that you could go into, or if you have additional coverages, or if you maybe insure a second person, a child, and so on, living with you. If you're just a single and you get the low frills variant, it will actually be less than that. So overall, for banking and insurances, you can calculate about 50 Swiss francs per month-ish. And if you need legal insurance, it will be a bit more. If you take the no-frills variants with more exclusions, it will even be a bit less. So ballpark per year, about 600 Swiss francs. As always, I'm curious to know what you think about this topic. If you have any questions, if you would like me to do another video and go more in depth about any of the aspects we talked about today, or if you think that you definitely need this other fancy insurance that I didn't cover today, please let us know in the comments. And of course, if you like this video, please click like, because this way I can basically rank the topics that I will make more videos about and also know what you're interested in. And of course, if you want to see more about this, please also click subscribe, because then you will get an immediate notification whenever I release the next video. See you in the next one.